Please give a warm welcome to co-writer Emily Mortimer and co-writer and director Noah Baumbach. Thank you, Emily and Noah. Thank you for braving the weather.
Yeah,
It was very exciting getting here.
we had a thrill ride coming up.
Emily, I'll start with you. How did you guys came up with this frame of which actually reminded me of A Christmas Carol, this character who is awakened by, instead of ghosts this time, well, memories that visit him?
Well, it was Noah's idea, and really, he had this notion of what this film would be, and he asked me to write it with him, and he knew he had the idea of an actor, probably a very famous actor, who's takes this sort of spurious film festival far away from where he lives in an effort to kind of escape some sort of present day sort of fracas or discomfort, and in this urge to sort of run away from his present, he keeps getting confronted by his past.
His past.
And that was sort of already there in Noah's head when he asked me to write with him. And
But it was just a notion. I mean, I just had it's like I'd emptied my pockets on the table, and Emily looked at it all and was like, that's when it really started to become something.
Tell us about the memories, him literally walking into the memories, and cinematically, you actually, it's practical effects, and in particular, the scene in the train where he's in the mirror, and it's just one take, gang. That was in special effects where you see the daughter and he walks into the classroom. That was all practical.
Yeah, they all are. I mean, we had written in the script that he would, that he would walk. I mean, we like this notion that memories kind of are there, whether we like them or not. Sometimes they're there just on the other side of the door, and it might be this door we open, or it might be this one, and that they live concurrently. That they're not. It wasn't flashbacks. That they're kind of this other. They're alive and
ready to ambush you.
Yes, ready to ambush you, and that they would be kind of like headwinds for Jay. And so we'd written this into it, and then it became a real. I'd say probably our largest challenge in prep and was how to do it, because we knew we were going to do it practically, and it would be. We wanted it to have a kind of grace and a sort of deceptive simplicity in a way. But we did build the sets just up against each other. So like the plane is built against the theater from his acting class and his childhood. So we would shoot the whole sequence with everybody on the plane and the present, and then we would follow George, and he would open the curtain, and everyone would just be waiting on the other side in 1989. And we would trigger that, and George would walk out, and we would just shoot all of that. And I think, it was something. It felt. It was never something. There was no CGI at all. It felt like it. I guess because there is this other sort of, I don't know if you could say narrative, but this other thing of the movie is so much about our love of the medium and the form.
Correct.
And so exploring these sort of old-fashioned sort of let's put on a show kind of, aspects of cinema making and storytelling, visual storytelling, it felt really right for the movie. I mean, it's my aesthetic anyway, but it felt, given that we'd written ourselves the complication of these things. I mean, the mirror was fun because the mirror was, he's saying J. Kelly, in the mirror, and it's a real mirror. But then he goes down to wash his face, and then the camera kind of moves around, and we see his daughter running
In the train station.
in the train station to get the train. And as we come back around to what in the movie is his reflection, what we've done is George ducks under the crane head and goes around to the other side of the mirror. We pull out the glass and put in just an empty frame of a mirror. So when we come around to his seeming reflection, George is now playing his reflection, and he comes up. Is everyone following what I'm saying? I've told this sometimes, and people are just like.
No, this is a smart group.
No, it's not. It's me I'm worried about.
This is a smart group.
And so when he comes up playing now his own reflection, and then he sees something in the corner of what is the mirror, but it's really obviously the lens, and he turns around, and we've now built the whole care center, and Riley Keough, who plays his daughter, is waiting over there, and an added bit is then the camera that we move past him, and she's talking. Jacqueline Duran, our costume designer, has made him his sort of train outfit with magnets and Velcro, so he can tear it off, and then he re-enters he's been wearing the shirt, which is like a kind of red cowboy shirt from the memory, has it underneath, so he goes in and plays his memory. And what was always kind of, and
was a credit to George's acting that he's able to switch.
Well,
to
I
that
think what
other
was
world.
always really startling watching is just that, which is that he would appear different in ways that it was very subtle, but he would appear different in the memory immediately. Like there'd just be something different, and obviously in that cases he's got different clothes, but he like in the plane one when he walks into the memory, I think he looks like the movie star on the plane. He's got his glasses, his sort of Steve McQueen jacket, and then he kind of walks back. And when he's watching his younger self, and we haven't done anything. There's no makeup change or anything. He looks older, and he looks beautiful, but he looks, he looks sort of more ordinary, I guess I should say. It's like more mortal. And it's something that George does that is something you can tell an actor to do. It's just something that he does.
Since I first saw the film, I've been dying to ask you this. Who came up with the idea that when we go into the memories, and you just described it, how you did it, the music plays backwards? The theme of Jay Kelly plays backwards.
Well, that was something, Nick Bertel and I came up with, who composed the score,
which is a beautiful, beautiful score.
Yeah, well, I talked, sort of like everything in the movie, I felt like there was a sort of old and new thing I wanted, I said to him, I'd love it to feel like a real movie score, like an old-fashioned like melody and have emotion and big emotion, and he had one of the first things, he actually wrote it when he read the script, so like I had it while we were shooting, I could play it for the actors, was this sort of waltz, this which became a kind of Jay Kelly theme. And it was in post when we were talking about the memories, and we were talking about sort of, I guess, like, the shadow self. We were kind of, it was always a question I think we talked about in the script of like, one of the questions of like, am I a good person? Am I good or am I bad? And I've defined myself, Jay has defined himself by his sort of winning goodness, his success, the fact that he is, an appealing person in the culture. But what if he isn't that, and then who is he? And so Nick came up with this idea. He said, well, maybe we just play it backward. And first he actually like just reversed it, like played the same cue backward. And then he was like, but what if I actually played it backward? And then he started to work on it, and it was sort of equally beautiful, but it did have this sort of other darker edge to it, and
which it ties beautifully with the movie, because there is this sort of darkness, melancholia that is.
It's this kind of undertow. We wanted the movie to feel like a pleasure, like you want to live in it, and be there and be on this journey as this guy essentially tries to outrun his mortality, but it's fun doing it because he's a winning person, but that this undertow kind of keeps, and it slows him down, and it, the first location in Italy is a graveyard. It's like,
I was actually going to mention that he's running away. He's trying to outrun his mortality, and all of a sudden, you guys put him in a cemetery on his first stop. Which Emily, you do. There's so many metaphors in this movie. Like even to start with the idea of the actor, that having an actor in a movie to me always is going to have to deal with questioning who you are. And then you put him in a train, so he's traveling. And there's the literal aspect, but there's also the emotional metaphor of traveling. Can you talk a little bit about those aspects?
Yeah, I think, as an actor, but also as a human being, I think that I really recognize that feeling of sort of trying to run away a lot and finding life easier when you kind of run away from it. and especially if you have a job that takes you away and that you love and that is a very good excuse for running away. It's very easy to fall into the trap of just making that excuse and keeping on running. And I think Jay is somebody that has spent his whole life doing that and being celebrated for it. But in many ways, I think that's what we all do. We spend our whole life kind of, coming up with tricks of avoidance in a way, tricks of avoiding the kind of who we really are, or having to grapple who we really are, or what we really care about, or what we should really care about. And often that's just because all those questions are too painful and difficult. And so either through work or through some kind of addiction to love or booze or whatever it is, you spend your life running, and then at a certain point it stops working and it catches up to you. And so whether or not you're a famous movie star or whoever you are, I think that does come to all of us at a certain point in our lives. And I think this film was a sort of, as you just said, a metaphor for that. So here he is literally running away from his life, and it's not working because his life keeps catching up to him in the form of these memories that he keeps walking in on and keep ambushing him. And so it was this kind of this poignant thing of seeing this guy that's outrun all these difficult questions so far, finally having to face them.
Tell me about the trigger point, the character of Timothy, played by Billy Crudup, that all of a sudden propels him. Tell us about creating that trigger, that character.
Well,
Emily?
we really we loved the idea of this character from his past. That if you're going to, this character from this uncomfortable moment in his past that pops up and reminds him of this kind of the inciting incident in a way of both his life and our movie, which is the time that he took this part from his best friend. But we wanted to keep it kind of ambiguous, that it's not necessarily a theft, really. He just happened to be in the right place at the right time, and he took a chance. But now he's thinking back on it and wondering whether, I don't know, whether that was exactly. Well, I don't know. There's a guy here that is a figure from a ghost from his past who is telling him that he behaved deeply badly towards him, and it's the beginning of everything. And we really worked on that scene. I think it was one of the scenes that we worked the hardest on, and that was the most fun to write. But it took us a long time. We kept going back to it through the process of writing the film itself, because it felt so important.
Well, I think I like the idea too that you see in the beginning of the movie sort of signs that Jay, that on some level he knows he wants to change something in his life. I mean, couldn't articulate it. I don't think if you asked him that. But when he runs into Timothy and he, the initial thing is to sort of cut it off and say, nice to see you, or, and then, gives him a card, and, like that there's this sort of deflection. And then there's this sort of moment of like, I'm free now, and he sends his manager and his security away, you know, that he is going to go out into the world and try to sort of reconnect with an old friend and be a kind of normal person. And then he pays dearly for it, you know. And I sort of like that he makes this gesture that I actually think is quite sympathetic, and then it doesn't pay off, or he sort of in essence gets punished for it. And but it still is what, you know, this restlessness, this sort of hidden restlessness in him, is clearly what also is sort of motivating him taking off. And you know, I find that sympathetic about the characters, that even in all of this sort of, with all of these masks and all of this defense that he's built up of, you know, that there's a notion in him that maybe the center can't hold. Maybe I have to do something, and maybe I have to go mad to do it. But and I think that was always sort of compelling. And Timothy obviously kind of is the one that sort of his conscience in a way, his sort of darker conscience or his guilt that says, you know, no, you're not who you think you are.
I have to ask you about the way you and Linus frame George in the film. At the beginning, he's center stage, he's big, and as the movie progresses, very, very subtly, he is to the side now. It's almost disappearing, blending in. Can you tell us about that visual dynamic?
Yeah. I mean, it's in the framing, and also sort of, I would say, in some of the momentum of the movie is that Jay's energy kind of drives it, and he is sort of the center because he's living in this illusion that can control his own universe. And as the journey continues, both self-motivated in some ways, but also in ways that he can't control, he does start to become a face in the crowd in a way. I mean, he's when he's first on the train, everybody's so interested in him. But the longer he's on the train, you see he's just walking through. People are back into their lives. They're having their conversations. And it's sort of around then that we started, when I think it's really the Daisy Cafe scene where we started to frame him. He's like blocked by her head a lot when he's talking. You can't quite, you know, he's not fully in frame. We shot him with a lot of headroom and sort of the widers, almost sort of like Edward Hopper kind of framing. And that continues as we get into Italy, and certainly when he's having the dinner with his father, you know, he's blocked a lot at that table, like by flowers. We shot it sort of low. There are always people like drinking wine, you know, in the foreground while he's talking, and that he is, you know, that he's not center stage in the same way. And then of course when he's in the forest at the end, he's a
tiny
little white suit in a big forest. And
I teach this in my class, and I'm going to use this clip that you just used to explain to my students the usage of frame to convey the character's journey, which is.
Yeah, well, I think it's a, you know, we do it in a way that doesn't sort of change, you know, call attention to itself, but I think it's you know, it's. I mean, we did look at a lot of Edward Hopper because he does have these really interesting, like, people, like you just, it's like something is off. It's like, but you can't quite explain why.
You used the Marriage Story. You used the aspect ratio. You know, and I'd love to hear why you used it in this one. I thought since it was a movie about cinema, you would have gone with a box here, but instead, but it works. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, it's 1:6:6, which I shot Marriage Story and Jay Kelly in the same aspect ratio, which is, you know, it's
boxier.
Yeah, it just comes in a little on the sides. It's like 1:8:5, but a little bit tighter, and it frames. I like how it frames faces. I think it frames like it. There's a kind of humane quality to it that I like. I mean, a lot of French New Wave movies were shot in that aspect ratio. But I think, yeah, because there's an American and a European quality to the movie, and which, I mean, also I suppose our American and European or international movies are really there's something I find myself always sort of existing somewhere between the two, somewhere in the ocean probably between the two. But but this movie literally goes from America to Europe, and so I think we did test widescreen because, of course, he's a movie star. The sort of idea of doing something that was, CinemaScope or 235, just sort of to do something kind of grander. But I felt that Linus and I felt like that that it was really more about, the movie is really about his humanity, and I think that the 166 seemed right for them.
Emily, the script has such musicality. It reminded me of like screwball comedies from the 30s and 40s, and you even have the overlapping dialogue. They cut each other off in the rat-tat-tat-tat-tat of a screwball comedy. Can you tell us about developing that? It has an incredible musicality.
Oh, well, thank you so much. It was so fun, that part of it, and I feel like Noah's dialogue has always had that kind of musicality, and he said to me right at the beginning, our script is going to be many more pages than it's going to end up minutes. People are always scared because his scripts run so long that, we're not scared, but if it was a normal human being writing the script, they'd say, but it's because it moves, his dialogue moves at a pace, and we would, but I think with this one it felt particularly important to, that it had to move, that we had to go on a journey with this character, and that there was an kind of an unconventional structure to the storytelling that meant even more than normal. That it had to go at a lick, and you had to kind of be on the run with him, and so I think we kept reading it to each other, and it was such a sort of joyful thing to do, and. And making sure that it felt, musical, and that it moved, and Noah takes such delight in words, and they give him such kind of joy, and so it was such a really joyful experience just to get to find that music with him, and to say the words over to each other time and time again.
Go ahead.
No, I was going to say I think there's 80 speaking parts in the movie, so there's a lot of which we wrote all of them. We wrote all the little lines of things that maybe people are saying over to the side, and so and things on the train. We have maybe like 30 tracks going at the same time. Everybody's mic'd and everybody's talking, and so which gives us then the freedom to in post we can sort of bring things up or down, but I think it's the opening shot really that. Sort of, in a sense, both it sort of shows you how maybe you might want to watch the movie, and also how you might want to listen to the movie. That because it's like there are things that are of importance, and there's things of maybe less importance. It's sort of like those like music documentaries I love, where they break down, the tracks on Rumors or something, and you kind of get to hear like, oh wow, that's the bass line, like you get to hear, and so we sort of build the vocal tracks sort of in a way like that, so that things are here and here, and you can maybe hear it, or we pan that over to the left, so you can, it's there for you if you want it, but really it's this, and and we tried to sort of lay it all out there in the opening piece.
Which is the orchestra is rehearsing to play the score for Jay Kelly.
Well, that was what Nick came up with. The idea was, he was like, would you want music there? And my first thought was, I don't know. Well, it's sort of, we have so much going on in that. And then he said, well, let me just try this thing. And then he sent me this thing, and it is, in his mind, it was like the orchestra like rehearsing the score for the rest of the movie, like that in some ways the musicians are working the same way that the crew and the thing. It's like we're getting, it's all this sort of disparate, sort of seemingly unrelated elements that when they all kind of form and come together, like the the forced perspective of the set in the opening shot. You know, it's that sort of old-fashioned thing where it looks like nothing, but if you come around and see it, oh, it looks like a skyline. It's like actually, and so the music was doing something similar. It was like forming itself throughout, which I loved, and then we you know, so it's there, and then that sort of also enters into the memories that we play with the backward J. Kelly theme. It also, these sort of, again, these instruments that are kind of trying to find where they fit.
Mm-hmm. Emily, Noah just mentioned about all the different characters. I was really impressed with, this is a film from the get-go you established that is about him going inward, introspection, but then the narrative expands outwardly with all these different characters. Can you tell us about that syncopation?
Well, we realized early on that we were telling a story about a film star going a bit mad, and that he was the hero of his own story. But that we were also telling a story about all the people that he's surrounded with, particularly Ron, but not just Ron and Liz and his entourage, and that they're all the heroes of their own story, and they all have messy lives and complicated things going on, and families that aren't perfect, and midlife crises, and all of it, and we all do, and that it became, in a way, part of Jay's learning experience is his ability to recognize that too, is that everybody's the hero of their own story, and the world doesn't just revolve around me. And so we needed to kind of somehow dramatize that, and Noah was very sort of delighted by the idea of all these characters right from the beginning. I remember him talking about that. He said, I just want lots of people in this film, and I want to people it with people, and so we set about doing that, and there are a lot of people. There are more than like I think 80 speaking roles, and it required that constant balance of sort of trying to make it effortless and enjoyable and an amazing ride, but you have to be so precise. And kind of, you have to work really hard to weave all those threads together in a way that doesn't feel cumbersome.
I was struck with one theme that popped in, and it was Jay's relationship with Adam Sandler, where it shows that in relationships there are power imbalances, where, you know, the line that I remember is that he says, "You're my best friend who takes 15% of what I make."
My manager keeps quoting that line back to me and saying, it's not 15%, it's 10%.
Tell us about developing that. That it's a complex relationship between Jay and Adam, which, by the way, Adam Sandler is freaking unbelievable. And
well, yeah, I mean, I think that it was, I think in a way, it is really in some ways that relationship more than any that forces Jay into a kind of reckoning, where he sees this guy who has devoted his life to him and to the movies that he makes, and who believes in him and actually really loves him, suddenly just so let down by him. And yes, of course it's complicated, and yes, he does pay him 15%, which is a lot for a manager. But he's also his friend, and those two things can be equally true. And life is full of complicated relationships, and there is always some sort of strange transaction that's going on, and you as a kind of human being in the world have to work out how to navigate that and to keep your kind of your heart, and it's that, I think it's that moment, that big fight finally between Adam and Jay, between Ron and Jay, in the discotheque in this sort of far off hill town in Tuscany, that finally kind of brings it home to him, and it's then that he finally has the courage to call his lost daughter and try to make up with her, and just to sort of accept defeat or otherwise, or just face it finally.
Yeah. Going back to craft, incredible craft, all across the board. But you mentioned Jacqueline Duran, who did and you actually mentioned the Steve McQueen look. There's also Marcello Mastroianni look. There is a Cary Grant in North by Northwest look. But it doesn't look like he's wearing a costume. It looks like it's Jay Kelly. But you notice the nods. Tell us about working with Jacqueline and that idea of alluding to other movie stars in the costuming.
Well, it was something we did in the script too, where when we were doing it, we read lots of, actors, either biographies or autobiographies, and in ways throughout, we sort of, in Jay's sort of makeup, we used things from other movie stars. Something Paul Newman had said this thing about how like he felt he lost his name when he became famous, and I've heard other famous actors say that it's like suddenly what Paul Newman means is different than what it used to mean. What the kid named Paul Newman, and it was something that we put in the sort of notion of Jay, even in his repeating his name, of like, what is it? Is it, what does it mean? Like, is it him, or is it this other? Does it exist with Gary Cooper? Does it exist, inside? Is it him? And and we said, Ron says, you're up there. You're up there when he sees the big poster of him in the square, and he's like, I'm down here, but Jacqueline, sort of picked up on that with this sort of notion of Jay's costumes and things that what if we use sort of iconography from things we've, loved from movie stars that Jay kind of casually wears throughout the movie. And of course, in Italy, the white suit felt right because of, Marcello. But then there's also other great whites, Man in the White Suit. There's Alec Guinness. There's, actually, I was thinking, like, Chow Yun-fat is in The Killer, the John Woo movie, has a great white suit. And there's several other examples. But yeah, of course, like a train. So we looked at North by Northwest, and Jay, it's actually his suit in the memorial. Peter's memorial is sort of inspired by the suit he wears in North by Northwest, and his outfit on the train with the blue in the jacket and those sort of white pants. There was that came actually from another Cary Grant. It was like a fashion layout and things, and so we were looking. There was Steve McQueen. There was also George. I mean, we looked at George. Things too. The tan coat that he wears in the opening movie, was something I'd seen George in a thing from a while ago. I thought it would be great to see him in that kind of thing again with blood on it.
One last question, and it's Noah. In your past films, you've dealt with themes that you dive into in Jay Kelly. Complex family dynamics. Search for identity, the challenge of parenting. But this film feels to me like it's your most universal film, that you've able to, synthesize everything that you've been longing for, and now it feels just very universal. Do you agree?
Well, I'm glad to hear that. It was something I think, I don't know, at some point I became aware of and we discussed, I think, was that in the past I've written several characters, and some of my movies have defined themselves by their lack of success, but also by the fact that they aren't who they expected to be. Like, and that there's this sort of sense of like, I never became the thing I wanted to be or thought I would be. And what does that mean about who I am? And I think, then exploring with Jay this sort of notion of like, I became the thing that I wanted, and I have that thing, and I'm defined by being now this sort of figure in, this icon, this thing in the culture. And in both cases, it's this barrier between the character and themselves, that this sort of defining yourself by an external thing. And I think, so as Emily's been saying, I think it's something everybody finds themselves doing. And it is this sort of, whether you realize it all the time or not, but this gap between who we are and, who we present as and who we might actually be. And, the cheesecake is a joke, but it's also, and it's based on, that sort of notion of like a rider, but it is this thing of like, he did mention it one time and Ron picked up on it, and maybe he does like cheesecake, and maybe he is a person who likes cheesecake, and that's kind of profound for him in a way. Or it could be if he allows for it. And I think, again, it's like that's a, sort of a silly thing, but it is these things that we've kind of decided about ourselves. And, when we're younger, we have this notion that, we have all the time in the world, and we make bargains with ourselves, and we make decisions, and we follow paths, and we, choose one thing over another, or I'll get back to that, he says it to Jessica, that he expected to get back to it, to come back and be a father, an attentive father, but he had to keep it. And, I think you kind of, you reach a point where you have this sort of startling realization that, the human experience is also your experience. And I think that's something that Jay is reckoning with.
And that's why the last line is so poignant. I like to do it again. Which will go down in history. Mark my words, it's one of the greatest ending lines. It's really amazing. Yeah. Thank you for being here, both of you.
Thank
What
you.
a joy.
Thank you for talking to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, everybody.